Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Browns are a 3-win team in December. It's time to start looking forward to the offseason, start to look forward to solutions for this team. Obviously, one of the biggest problems that the Cleveland Browns have had all season, and you can argue this is why the Brown season is the way it is inconsistency at the quarterback position. I feel like that's putting it mildly. When we're looking at Jameis Winston and him playing, going, man, that's so much better. This Jameis Winston run, Corey, has been wild to me because I have been watching it under the whole time, kind of with a good understanding of what Jameis always was going to be. Mm-hmm. And then, just because he wasn't Deshaun Watson, and he was playing better than what Deshaun was, which was what EPA said he was the worst since 2011. People started really jumping on that train, and it's interesting to see people come off of it because to me, I'm like, this is the Jameis Winston relief pitcher experience, right? You throw him in for 3-4 innings, he might be fine, but he gets past that pitch count, he gets to that 6th inning, he's going to start getting rocked. And that's what you're seeing with Jameis right now.
Yeah, for sure. And it's always interesting, too, when I look at the defensive coordinators and kind of who I know them to be. And, the games that he played well in, I think the league has pretty much figured out Lou Anarumo. Zach Orr is a first-year defensive coordinator in Baltimore. And so those were Anarumo coming up this weekend, so we'll see if they let him play. But Zach Orr, first-year play caller in Baltimore. The New Orleans, he played pretty well, didn't turn the ball over. They just fired Dennis Allen, and they have Joe Woods as their defensive coordinator. And then you get into guys like Steve Spagnuolo, and then you get into guys like Vance Joseph. And Vance Joseph has been putting quarterbacks in blenders all season in Denver as their defensive coordinator. And so James looked fine for 3/4 of that game in Denver. But I kind of figure, once we get into these defensive coordinators, they're going to figure out ways to rotate on the back end. They're going to figure out ways to create some eye candy for him, and he loves to jump on some eye candy, and that's resulted in 9 interceptions in the last 4 games. So
yeah, I've been shocked that through the first 8 interceptions, I was like, okay. He hasn't thrown that post interception over the middle of the field yet, right? Where he gets fooled, gets his eyes all big. And then I saw it right when it left his hand. I'm like, oh my God, he's going to throw that interception. Because he finally threw that this week. Also, it's been amazing. I've never seen somebody throw this many interceptions and none of them are tip ball interceptions. All of these things are getting caught clean by defensive backs. It's not even you could blame it on, well, it's just misfortune. It's nah, man, he's just throwing it to him.
Yeah, did you hear what Trent McDuffie said, that he tracked it on the Jumbotron? He saw it on the Jumbotron. He's like, oh, I got to get my head around. And then it landed right in his lap in the corner of the end zone on that one. But yeah, he's just thrown him right to defend. And the Baltimore game, too, he got away with the bad one against Kyle Hamilton and some stuff like that, too, which could have been a little bit of Elijah Moore communication on the Kyle Hamilton dropped pick that should have ended that game. But yeah, I mean, he's just throwing clean to defenders right now. It's not fun to watch.
And it's also when these interceptions are happening in the part of the field, he's throwing a lot of these interceptions. I did a breakdown of when he's throwing these interceptions. Looking at all of them, I was shocked to see most of them, overwhelming majority, are in scoring part of the field for the Cleveland Browns, right? A lot of these interceptions end up in the end zone. And there are a lot of them on first down. And these are just you can't do that and you cannot do that, right? Just combos on top of, these aren't just normal interceptions, where at least with Joe Flacco, if he did throw those interceptions, he did play well enough to back himself up and dig himself out that hole. What we're seeing with Jameis is he's throwing these interceptions and then he's not particularly playing well at the end of the game to get you out of it, which is pretty much the difference. Also, I think the defense is playing a lot better last year with Joe Flacco, which makes a bit of a difference. But now that brings us to the Browns' current situation. By the way, make sure you check out Corey Kinnan's stuff, Daft on Drafts, websites, blog, and it's also a podcast. So make sure you check out his work there. Very good stuff. We're here to discuss 2 articles that Corey wrote, one about Sam Darnold and another one about the options that may be out there, especially the veteran quarterback options that may be out there for the Cleveland Browns this offseason. I want to start with the conversation about Sam Darnold because This one is fascinating to me. Like I'm gonna be honest with you. I can't wrap my mind around the idea of 30 plus $1 million for Sam Darnold. At this moment, I understand he's played really well. He has the statistics to kind of back it up. And this is what they're a 12-1 team. And usually when that kind of a quarterback hits the market, my question with the price tag on Sam Darnold, because I saw PFF drop the $42 million valuation on him. My question with Sam Darnold is, I know we bring up the Baker Mayfield contract, and you brought that up in your article as like a template that they could follow. How does that change when it's not the team that he had the success with that's giving him that contract, right? Like he's not been in the building. How does that change the market value on him? Because I think if the Vikings were in a position to just extend him and not really care about what the future is, and maybe they're still in that spot. Who knows how they feel about JJ, who they drafted in the top 10. If that's not the situation and somebody new is coming in, how does that change the market for him? Because I think that makes a significant difference because it's been only 1 year of production like this.
Well, yeah, anytime you hit the market, the price tag's gonna go up because you're hitting a public auction pretty much. So it will go up a little bit. The market will, compared to the Buccaneers getting Baker's deal done before free agency started, compared to probably what the not the probably what Pittsburgh's going to go through with Russell Wilson. They're probably going to get a new deal done with him before the market opens, right? So those guys are going to be able to get ahead of the market. Compared to which that Russell Wilson deal, it's going to happen. Like Russell Wilson's playing pretty really well for the Steelers right now. I think that's probably going to be the new template that we're going to see, the new market for like this. Let's call it a bridge plus quarterback, like guys who are going to get long-term deals, but they're going to build in outs after like a year or two, right? Like bridge plus quarterbacks. Like it's Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield is again the example that I used. Tampa Bay gave him a 3-year, $105 million deal, but they built an out in after this year in case they brought him new. Dave Canales got the job in Carolina. They brought in Lane Cohen, and it's been going really well with Cohen too. So props to Baker. But they built in and out in case it didn't go well. In case it was a 1-year thing, you can spread out that dead money and cut bait. And so I think that's kind of the deal we're kind of talking about here as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like a middleman contract, right? Where it's like this quarterback will get you to whoever it is. The Alex Smith dream, right? Where it's like, okay, you have Alex Smith that stabilizes the organization for a little bit. You're not going to be a bad football team. Nobody's going to get fired. You're going to be able to be competitive, and you're going to be able to develop the players you draft. And then once the guy comes around, maybe you move some resources to go up and get him. But you have a better chance of developing that guy because you're not just throwing them into the fire, which if you're the Browns, right, if we're talking about trying to develop a quarterback from scratch, like you got to consider that. Like it has not been successful.
No.
Dropping these guys into. I'm watching Caleb Williams right now, who like one of my favorite prospects ever, and he just looks so bad out there in Chicago at times. And I'm like, even if that top tier number one consensus one guy drops to you, you got to have a plan. You got to have stuff in place, or else that's not going to be what you want it to be. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is another example of this.
Yeah, as well. I think something else to consider with the Baker deal. Baker was only 29 when he signed that deal with Tampa Bay. Sam Darnold's only 28. So like the plus side of that bridge deal is like if it does work out though, these guys get another contract. These guys hang around. We don't have to draft a quarterback, and so I think that's the only difference compared to maybe Russ. Russ is what 35 now. So in Pittsburgh, like that probably is the true bridge plus. Like if it's a 3-year deal, it's probably a 3-year deal. The Stafford extension and Los Angeles, like he's under contract. They're 27. He's probably not going to get another contract, even though he's playing out of his mind still at his age in Los Angeles right now. That's the only difference here is we're talking about Sam Darnold, who's 28 years old, man. Like that guy could have another decade of football in him if it truly has figured out. And there are some things that are different than the Baker Mayfield situation that has lent me to maybe give a little bit more benefit of the doubt to Darnold. Like how much did that 1 year to reset in San Francisco really help him compared to he's just being schemed everything in Minnesota, which he is. They're running, almost 30% play action, 30% under center drop back. Like there is a lot that Minnesota's doing to help him, but how much did that reset with Kyle Shanahan under like behind Brock Purdy in an offense that is very quarterback friendly? How much did that help him? And then when we're talking about stylistically play callers, yeah, Kyle Shanahan to Kevin O'Connell is a very good progression because there is the Mike Shanahan ran organization, the QB Collective, which they haven't updated their website since like 2021. So I don't even know if they're like doing trainings or anything anymore. But the QB Collective branded themselves as the most quarterback ready training program out there, and it's run by guys from the Kubiak Shanahan tree. You go to their website. The coaches that are affiliated with it are Kyle Shanahan, Kevin O'Connell, Mike McDaniel, Matt LaFleur, Kyle Shanahan. And also Kevin Stefanski's on that list. So like I think the progression of play style, head coaching style, um, all matches up to where it's not like Sam Darnold is learning a new playbook all 3 years, but they're all running very similar schemes with their own individual wrinkles as well. Like I'll give it that.
Hmm.
And especially if Ken Dorsey hangs around next year, like the Ken Dorsey passing concepts meshed in. I don't know if Ken Dorsey will be calling plays again next year, but if he does hang around and they still want to do that mixture of Dorsey's passing concepts and Stefanski's offense, that'll be a little bit of a wrinkle. But like for the most part, we'd be talking about Sam Darnold in a pretty similar offensive structure for 3 straight years now. And so I think that gives you a little bit more comfort and maybe giving him if it's 42 million, we're talking maybe 3 year, $120 million deal with an out after a year and a half of guaranteed money. So I do think. I do think there's a little bit more leeway there though with Darnold because he is 28 and because this would be a third season in a similar situation.
Yeah, and I get the deal is feasible for the Cleveland Browns because, like, I know everybody loves to do the whole like, oh,
How can they
caps on
afford it? Blah blah
fire,
blah. Yeah.
yeah, all this stuff. It's like money can be moved around. If the Browns really want to do it, they can make it work. My question is like, inside the building, I mean, you just got off of not even got off. You just got pretty much through the bulk of what you're going to do with this whole Watson thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that thing blew up tremendously
Mm-hmm.
in your face, right? Like from Baker Mayfield playing well after leaving and the optics
Yeah.
of that. And then Deshaun not just being like, he's not even bridge-worthy right now. Like he is not even playable at this point. And he's coming off an Achilles. Like, so you have to imagine whatever we saw last year, he's going to be worse than that because he can't move as well as he did last year. So I have to imagine you're not going to see him on the field again. And you're going from that to like also to coming back and rearing up and saying, hey, Sam Darnold, I know it's only been 1 year. Let's throw a lot of money at that. Do you think that they're going to have the stomach to make that kind of a risk after, basically having this risk just blow up in their face like this?
Well, how much time do they think they have? Like how much
That's
confidence?
true.
Like that I think that's what it comes down to. And we're talking about a very different situation. Like Tampa Bay was good enough where they couldn't draft a quarterback. Cleveland isn't good enough where they can't draft a quarterback. But I mean, they can't draft a quarterback because there's not a quarterback worth drafting beyond the guy in Colorado who's going to go before they get on the clock more than likely. So like I think they have to stomach the situation that they're in. And that is, yeah, we're going to get 2025, but like if this thing blows up again in 2025, they're both getting fired. They're
Yeah.
both like that's the case that they're going to get fired. Um, like the leash, uh, and I like to think that at least Kevin Stefanski is the solution, is part of the solution.
Yeah.
Andrew Barry, I'm pretty indifferent towards at this point, but I'm convinced that Kevin Stefanski is part of the solution. But even I'm not dumb enough to sit here and be like, well, it's not his fault if it blows up and they win 4 games, 5 games next year, 6 games next year. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I'm saying? Like, and so I think they sit here and they know, well, we can't draft a quarterback because, I mean, you could look at the guy in Miami and Cameron Ward, but like you look at what Caleb Williams is doing, and a lot of the reasons that Caleb Williams is having a slower transition to the NFL is because what Caleb Williams loved to do at USC and Oklahoma was to create outside of structure, to live on the fringes of the sideline, to
Mm-hmm.
extend plays and then launch the ball down the field. That doesn't work at the NFL level. That does not work at the NFL level. What makes Patrick Mahomes so good, what makes Josh Allen much improved and probably the MVP frontrunner is that they learned like I have to play in structure, and when I have to get out, I have to get out. But they do it so sparingly. You can't live that way. You can't live that way on a down to down basis, and that's kind of the same situation with Deshaun Watson, and that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
the same situation with Cam Ward in Miami. They live that way. They want to play outside of structure all the time, and it doesn't work. So I don't think they draft that guy. I think he is snake oil to what they want when they're looking at the quarterback position. So like then you have to say like, well, then we have to do what we have to do. And Sam
Mm-hmm.
Darnold might be what they have to do to save their own
If
skin.
if the leash is that, like, if they're in a situation where they could potentially, if this they don't have a good season next year, which I agree. Like, you can't win 3 games or 4 games or whatever it is 2 years in a row and like think that it's going to be all gravy. It's going to be, you're going to probably lose your job if that's the case. So I agree with you. I think they need to do something to stabilize the position, at least get to a point where they can win some games, right?
Right.
Get to 500 or better. But if that's the case, do you see, like, is there going to be more roadblocks in the way of like kind of offering that kind of a deal that might extend past what Kevin, could be, if he's going to be here or not after this year, when it comes to Sam Darnold?
No, no, because at the end of the day, we're still talking about a quarterback contract that's going to come in $20 million
Mm-hmm.
under the market of what a starting NFL quarterback gets paid. And and again, just using Baker Mayfield's contract as an example, like if Tampa wanted to, they could cut him this year. Only paying 15 million in dead cap in 2025 is a little steep, but in a rising cap, it's really not that bad. And then 5.7, 5.7, 5.7 over the next 3 years to spread out that dead cap. So like I do think the Browns in a rising cap can spread it out similar to that. And so like even if you say you sign Sam Darnold to a 3-year deal, kind of a similar out, they win 9 games. What prohibits you from drafting a quarterback and just running it back with Sam Darnold again for a second year as a bridge quarterback while you get your other quarterback
Mm-hmm.
ready? So like I don't think Sam Darnold needs to be the answer. Um, if you're paying a quarterback $20 million under the quarterback contract to kind of be a bridge, he'd be 30 by that time, I don't think that's unrealistic. I don't think that's unreasonable. Um, either. Like the Alex Smith Colin Kaepernick thing is a little bit similar, but not really because Alex Smith got hurt and never got his job back.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's unreasonable. And I think what the Browns will need to know though is like if we sign this contract, we're gonna have to write it out. Um, but I think again, it's probably what the regime needs to do to save their own skin at the end of the day. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't think if you go in and you sign Justin Fields to a 1-year deal and say like, well, we'll just bridge with Fields until we can get a quarterback. Well, then you're not going to see that quarterback you're going to get.
Yeah, yeah. They need to figure out a way to get there, right? Now there are ways you could build around the quarterback position. I always argue, like, you want to get by with as bad as quarterback players you can get. Just build the strongest defense you can, because it just offers so much margin of error. I mean, look at every trash
Well, they
quarterback you've ever
tried that.
seen win the
Yeah.
Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
Like it worked in 2023, right? Where they were able to win good games against, like, PJ Walker was playing quarterback at points.
Yeah.
DTR beat the Steelers. And Joe Flacco, to this day, people are still like, man, Joe Flacco was out there cooking, right? Like, even though he was throwing just as many interceptions as Jameis Winston was. Well, I think he ended up with 12 or something like that. So
It
Jameis might
was
be
it's pretty
more,
similar.
right?
Yeah. Well,
But
yeah,
in a
Jameis is
similar
on
amount of
pace
time,
for 20 in 8 games, which is unreal. But
Jameis might lead the league in interceptions and only play half the season, which is like the most Jameis Winston stat
well, I
that
don't know
you
if
can
he's going
come
to
up
play
with.
another game, but his leash might be going. They might have cut the cord there. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll
But
see what happens. He has a way of getting back on the field, though,
he
right? Because he
does.
wasn't ever supposed to see the field to begin with, right?
Yeah.
Like, they had benched him and made him the third quarterback when Deshaun had went down, and then he just figured his way back up there. So, but yeah, we'll see what happens with the rest of that. What are some other, like, I know you said that Sam Darnold feels like the best bet for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are some other options that the Browns could look at if maybe, let's say, for whatever reason, Minnesota decides, hey, no, we want to keep him and develop JJ for a couple years behind him, and he doesn't hit the market like we're anticipating?
Yeah, so everybody listening is going to leave some hateful comments for some of these names that I'm saying. But this is just to preface this by saying we are talking about very slim pickings here. I'm not going
Mm-hmm.
to tell you any name that you're going to be over the moon about. I'm not going to tell you a single name that you're going to be over the moon about unless Seattle wants to ship off Geno Smith for that final year of his contract, which I don't think they're going to. That's another Bridge Plus situation, right? They'll probably draft a quarterback this year, ride it out with Geno, the bridge to that guy, right? Unless Seattle wants to do that, that's the only guy I'd be really stoked about. Um, Again, we're talking about Justin Fields, who started and won games for Steelers this year, but it was never pretty. And I still don't think he's got it. Like, I don't think he knows what he's seeing, and he's definitely not seeing it fast enough.
Yeah.
Can that work with Kevin Stefanski running a bunch of play action and just saying, just get your eyes there and throw the football? I don't know because he's never been able to get his eyes there and throw the football.
And I think too, there's something like if you're going to get a flawed quarterback, that's one thing, right? I mean, the Steelers are having success with a very flawed quarterback in Russell Wilson right now. I think if you're the team that's going to bring that guy in, you have to be willing to accept and embrace whatever it is that that guy doesn't do well, right? Like you got to just be able to be willing to be like, okay, Justin Fields is not going to do this. Like we cannot sit here. Like it's like the Jameis if he just cuts down the interception thing.
Right. He's going to have a 4-second time to throw. He's going to take some really ugly sacks.
You have to accept what that is at the quarterback position in order to get the best out of it. And I think with Justin Fields, I wonder if that is a skill set that the Browns are comfortable with the downsides of, because everything about him screams Kevin's going to lose his mind with him.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Kevin's losing his mind right now with Deshaun and with Jameis. Like,
because I feel like the thing that drives him crazy is when you don't see it. Right. Like he expects you to see it. Like if you're not accurate, I think he can live with it. But if you don't see it, then he that's where you see him get the most kind of pissed off on the sidelines, right? It happened with Baker Mayfield. We saw this at times with DTR, where it's like, you got to see it? It's right there.
Yeah, it's right there. Yeah. So the next option, again, slim pickings. Don't kill me for it. Kirk Cousins' dead money is really spread out on his contract. If the Falcons want to trade him and say we're going to start Penix next year, they've spread out his dead money in a post-June 1 trade, so it would be a trade over the summer, to where the Falcons are just eating $12.5 million the next 3 years in dead money. Kirk Cousins and Kevin Stefanski have a very strong history together in Minnesota. Again, we are not talking about like this is the next quarterback, this is ending the jersey. But Kirk Cousins' base salary is $27.5 million next year and then $35 million in 2026. And again, if you're trading for him, Atlanta's eating all the guaranteed money, so there's be no dead money attached to his name.
So you could cut him after that first
anytime.
year.
Anytime.
Yeah. Anytime.
So if we're talking about $27.5 million, again, that's $35 million below the quarterback market for a starting quarterback. If you want a reasonable bridge option for 2025, maybe 2026, it's Kirk Cousins, because Atlanta's going to have to sell him for a pack of peanuts at the end of the season.
You think there's any possibility like that he ends up like backing up Penix there? Like, does Kirk seem like he's going to be willing to accept that?
No shot. Yeah. No shot in my mind that's happening. So Kirk Cousins is probably outside of going and paying Sam Darnold on the market. If you're looking for like, no, we actually want to try to find a long-term-ish quarterback, here's your most realistic bridge option. It's trading a 5th-round pick for Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I could see Kevin thinking like, seeing the success that Russ has had after Russ looked cooked in Denver, even though it's a different version of cooked, I think
we're talking about an Achilles injury for a quarterback who already wasn't nimble. Yeah.
Let's have 2 quarterbacks with Achilles injuries in 2026. But it is a little bit of a different situation, but it is a skill set that I think he's comfortable with. Like I could see that possibility of being there. I think at this point, right, Kirk's always been kind of labeled as mid. I think at this point he's kind of like Shake, right? Like he's the shavings that came off the bud. But it is what it is with him. Maybe you could still smoke it. I don't know.
He looks pretty cooked. He looks pretty.
Yeah. Look, if you bring Kirk Cousins in, it is a experiment, right? Yes. Like it's not like if you did it 3 years ago where you're like, oh yeah, we're gonna ride this one out and guarantee to get to a 2nd-round playoff game or 1st-round playoff game or whatever it is. Nah, that's an experiment that you're hoping to work out, similar to what you did with Russ and kind of similar to what Pittsburgh did with Russ. You probably want to bring in somebody else that has a little bit of a different skill set that you feel like could compete, which I think brings us to the next guy, to Green Bay.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because we're talking about a guy who people loved pre-draft, and I didn't like him at all pre-draft. I gave him like a 3rd or 4th round grade pre-draft, but everybody's like, this guy can go number 1 overall. This guy's a 1st-round pick. He ended up falling to the 3rd round despite a whole year of annoying chalkboard scratching buzz. But Malik Willis, man, it didn't work out in Tennessee. He got traded to Green Bay this offseason and then started 2 games for Green Bay, again, under one of those QB collective coaches that we're talking about, Matt LaFleur. Didn't turn the ball over, went 2-0, and looked competent Again, getting his eyes and getting the ball out, doing the bare minimum. Again, you need to put up a lot of safeguards around Malik Willis. Again, a lot of heavy play action. Sure, that's that for sure. But again, we're talking about a quarterback who probably runs a 4.5, and that gives you a little more leeway as well. We're talking about a quarterback with a really big arm, and that gives you some leeway as well. But he kind of has that Justin Fields-ish. He did at Liberty, and he did in Tennessee. Of like he's clued. Like he doesn't know what he's looking at. He doesn't know what he's looking at. But again, he came to Green Bay, started 2 games, and in an offense that has a little more structure, has a little more guardrail up for quarterbacks with Matt LaFleur, and it's worked out. The only thing then you have to consider is he's only on a 1-year deal. He's in the last year of his rookie contract. And would Green Bay consider just saying, listen, man, Jordan Love's got hurt before. We're paying him pennies. We're not trading him. Which I think is a very real situation as well, where Green Bay just says, like, no, he's staying here and he's backing up Jordan Love. But Malik Willis is maybe the most boomer bust option, but maybe one that I have more interest in than a guy like Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers.
Speak on Aaron Rodgers real quick.
Do I have to? I want this guy.
I have my hesitations about like 40, like doing the whole 35, $40 million for Sam Darnold thing right after coming off of this Deshaun thing. Oh my God, the pit in my stomach, the ick I get when I hear let's go after Aaron Rodgers is just insurmountable.
Again, I'm just giving you names. Myles Garrett openly admitted last week in a press conference, yeah, we've been dealing with some dysfunction. And if that's the case, you don't bring this guy within 100 miles of Berea. But it is a name. It is a name. And he did play pretty well last week against the Jaguars, where Deshaun Watson also played his best game as a Cleveland Brown. So take that with a grain of salt if you really want to. But it's a name. He'll be 42. I don't want to do this. I don't think he should come within 100 yards of Berea, 100 miles of Berea. But it is an MVP winner who, at the end of the day, can still throw the football around the field. But there's a lot that would come with Aaron Rodgers that I would be willing to not bring into this locker room.
I feel like you definitely have learned a lesson that you do not bring Aaron Rodgers into a situation where you feel like the coach is one bad year away from getting fired.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I feel like you can't advocate for that if you are Kevin or AB, because you are basically advocating for your own destruction. Like, like that to me feels like the only way I see Aaron Rodgers being here is if there is truly dysfunction in the building and Jimmy Haslam decides, I want to get me a quarterback. Let's go get Aaron Rodgers.
Well, that's terrifying because that could happen at any moment.
Yeah. So it's like if Aaron Rodgers is in the building for the Browns, one, still think Aaron Rodgers would feel like he's too good for this, right? Like, don't even know if he was available, if he'd even come to Cleveland. But two, if it does happen, it does not scream that the people we think are in control are in control.
Right. Yeah.
That screams, that's a giant red flag where I'm like, okay, somebody's about to get fired sooner than later, right? That makes it obvious that you're about to tear it down and do everything else, because this is either they're so desperate they don't care that this might get them fired, or somebody else made that decision to bring him in. Either way, does not bode well for the Cleveland Browns if you go that direction.
No, not at all. No, and I really think those are the only options you got. I mean, we could talk about Jimmy G, but Jimmy G hasn't been a starting quarterback in a year and a half. Like, I don't want that. That's a terrible option. Horrible option.
How do you feel about Carson Wentz?
Even worse, somehow. And again, we're talking about a guy who brings dysfunction with him as well. Like, that's
people don't like him.
People don't like Carson Wentz. That's it. That's it. You're not, again, unless Shador finds a way down to what they could work their way up to the 5th pick, I think. Vegas, the Giants, and the Patriots don't have a winnable game left on their schedule. I think
Vegas and the Jaguars play each other next week, right?
Yeah.
So I think if the Browns lose out and everybody loses the way that you think they would lose, they can get the 3rd pick, I believe. But it's probably going to be the six. You're going to be
sixth or
at the
seventh.
top of
Yeah,
the top 10, right? Like the
yeah,
top half. They're more than likely, especially if you win a game down the stretch versus like the Bengals or something like that.
yeah. And they got to play the Dolphins in cold weather, and the Dolphins can't play in cold weather, so that's a
Yeah,
game they could win as well. So
they could
yeah,
easily sneak out of here with 5 wins.
I think they probably I think they can because again I think everybody's figured out Lou Anarumo except for Deshaun Watson, and so we could see some fireworks this week, even with I think DTR, but
The Browns had figured out Lou Anarumo for like 4
they have,
years.
yeah, and now everybody else
And then
finally has
Deshaun
too. Yeah,
Watson plays against him. He's the one guy that has played against the Bengals, cannot figure them out since 2020. It blows my mind that happened like multiple times where I'm like, okay, well, to be fair to Deshaun, and this is the only time I'm going to really spend this. He did play well in that first half versus the Bengals, right? Like he was playing quote unquote his best football, but it still wasn't good, right? Like
people point to like what was it 9 for 9 or 9 for 11 for whatever it was, but
it was like 9 for 11 for like 62 yards or something like
yeah,
that, which is like, man, we're that's a Russian stat line. Like that's a pretty
yeah.
good stat line for Nick Chubb, right? But it's just fascinating to me that like every other quarter, Jacoby Brissett ripped up the Bengals defense
On Halloween,
right?
yeah,
On
yeah.
Halloween, on Monday Night Football. We're able to get that with him, but for whatever reason, like none of the stuff that usually happened that you can count on with just a regular quarterback in this offense was able to happen with Deshaun Watson. And like if you're in the Browns, you gotta figure that out. Like, why did that happen with him? Was he just that bad? Like, because it's easy to just hand it off and just say he was just that bad and not really evaluate why that did happen. But like, was there like a mismatch in the skill set for the system that you need? Like, really got to figure out exactly why this thing failed. And like, obviously part of it is Deshaun stinks, but also like what around this also didn't help it. Like, was this a bad matchup of talent? Was this what you were asking him to do he was not capable of doing? Were you asking him to do new things? Were you trying to expect him to be different? Like why did this thing crash out the way that it did? Because nobody expected it to be this bad.
No, no, because it wasn't even. I mean, that Houston game, his first game back from suspension was bad, but like it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that bad. His final 6 games of that 2022 season. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
the cold weather Saints game was awful, but everybody was off on that game because it was negative 30 degrees. But like the Washington game wasn't bad. Like, so that like they didn't have horrid Watson games when he came back from suspension. But it has been pretty much ever since. And you can point to his record last year, but like, okay, his record doesn't matter. He was bad. Like they
Mm-hmm.
won games because they had the NFL's best defense last year. Yeah, man, I don't know if we need a 30 for 30 on that to dissect what the heck happened there. Uh, yeah, yeah, it's rough.
There has to be something more than football there because like it just doesn't make sense how much
I mean, I
that thing
think
failed.
the whole everything that happened probably took its toll on him mentally. I mean,
Oh yeah,
that would take a
absolutely.
toll on anybody mentally. But I also question, like, once he got his money, how much time he was investing in
See,
other
I
his other
I have a hard time
things.
believing like once he got the money, he was like just chilling because like this man cared about his reputation. Like that was
That's
one thing
fair.
that was always like obvious with him, right? He was visible with the charity stuff. He wanted to make sure that you thought he was a good person. Like that was always something that he did, especially prior to all of the things breaking. And I think he thought like he really believes in his mind, like if you play good enough, you can get your old life back. You can get your old reputation back. You can get everything. So like I think that's his like that was a giant motivator for him. I don't think he failed because he didn't try hard. I think he just failed. And I can't explain it because that's the only way you can look at it. Is like, okay, maybe the mental stuff weighed on him.
I mean,
Maybe he
there's
was
like
trying to
the stuff out there,
press.
right? There's the stuff out there too that maybe Bill O'Brien was actually doing a lot more for him pre-snap and like building up a lot more around him than people
Yeah,
realized in Houston. But like, you don't throw for 5,000 yards. I mean,
by accident.
I guess Jameis did, but whatever. But so maybe you do. But like, you don't do some of the stuff that Deshaun was doing in Houston with like, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
With training wheels on, right?
Right?
Like
Yeah.
it, something broke. Like something had to have broken, right? Like it maybe the time off broke his brain. Like something. He's clearly the dude that you traded for, that played and got MVP votes for a 4-win team in 2020. Was not the same guy that you got here in Cleveland,
not even
remotely, right? Like you never got that guy. Something, like obviously something happened, but
it was like the Temu version that then got donated to Goodwill and then bought secondhand again.
It's like he got his powers to like the Space Jam basketball, right? Like it's just like, oh, he just never was coordinated again after the aliens took his powers to go ahead and play Bugs Bunny in the Looney Bowl or whatever the hell they would call it, right? Like it feels like a plot out of a movie there. I'm just fascinated by that failure because like, yeah, it's easy to go terrible person, accused of terrible things and just kind of write it off. But like really, this dude was seen as a top 5 quarterback. And then 3-4 years later, he's putting up some of the worst EPA numbers that stat has ever seen.
Yeah. I mean, it's ugly. And again, the Browns can leak what they want to the media. They know deep in their hearts that guy's never playing another snap for them. That dude's probably never playing another snap in the NFL. Like they can leak whatever they want about like, oh, we're going to give him a chance to come back, and they're letting him down so easy. He's never playing another snap for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, it was funny that they leaked that report like it was like not the same report that dropped before Thursday Night Football, but just like worded slightly different.
Yeah,
because it was worded, oh, Kevin's keeping his job, and then Deshaun's gonna have a chance to compete for the job, which we were like, okay, that's definitely changing status,
sure, buddy.
And then 4 weeks later, they're like, oh, well, Deshaun's not out of it; he's gonna compete for the job. Like this is the same thing you said 4 weeks ago,
right.
Like that you had drop out there and it's being reported as a new one. And even Jonathan Jones in his report was like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
and if you follow where the Browns tend to leak their info to, it is with the CBS reporters. Kimberly Martin, before she went to ESPN and became like one of the talking heads at ESPN, was AB's go-to. Like, you want some info? Here you go. And then Jonathan Jones took Kimberly Martin's job. And now it's Jonathan Jones who's getting all these like Brown scoops, and you wonder why.
Yeah. So I just find that part of it fascinating, where it's like they're still trying to like string us along, act like we believe that they're going to keep doing that thing.
It's not happening. Yeah.
Yeah. One day we just need to do a postmortem on this whole Watson thing, because like it is a spectacular failure that even the most cynical people could not have anticipated this being like, this is, I hope they can dig themselves out of it. Corey, where can people find you again to make sure they can check out more of your stuff?
Yeah, so again, I am still the managing editor at Browns Wire, so any Browns content's coming from Browns Wire. But for the most part, my draft stuff is the bulk of my work. And so daftondraft.football is my Substack website, where I'm doing a lot of draft stuff. And I do have the Daft on Draft podcast as well. 4 episodes a week, chopping it up with Dalton Miller there on that as well. So that's pretty much it. Daft on Draft and Browns Wire.
Definitely, man. Make sure you guys go check that out. Follow him on Twitter, follow him on Blue Sky, follow him wherever he has his social medias. Make sure you check him out there. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.